Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
WCAT Radio presents The Messenger with messages of things happening in the Catholic Church. And now here's our host, Tony Szalkiewicz, The Messenger.
Good day, Bob.
Yes, it's good to be here.
Yes, and we have a guest speaker tonight, Father Eric from St. Paul's Church.
Hi, Tony. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Father Eric. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being on board. I'll give a little intro in a minute, but I wanted to share something tonight about one of the miracles that happened with my daughter. And this was the oldest one. She was doing cheerleading in high school, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and you know, they normally have spotters and cushions on, but this particular time they had neither, and the two spotter girls had turned away to look at something, and my daughter had done a backflip, which her head hit the concrete floor. We got a call that she was being taken to the emergency room at Hartford Hospital, where they actually admitted her because her brain started to swell a lot. So we got up there, and the doctors didn't know what to do. They were trying to, you know, they had her on all kinds of apparatus. And one day passed, another day passed. I forget exactly how long we were in there. But I do recall walking down the hallway with the doctor saying, look, we'd like to drill a hole in her skull to relieve the pressure because she was, the brain was swelling so much they wanted to do something with it. And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and it was one of those decisions that we said, no, we can't do that. And what we found out later was a good decision, but we didn't know it at the time. So they says, well, we'll keep her here another day, but other than that, you know, why don't you just, you know, basically bring her home, let her pass at home. So we got her home. She was in bed, and I said to my wife, I said, you know, Karen, we didn't do one thing. We had some friends that came over from our charismatic renewal group that we had, a prayer group. I said, you know, we never prayed over her. And they said, you're right, we didn't. So there was like 3 or 4 of us in the bedroom, and she was basically semi-conscious. And we started praying over her. And then after, 10, 15 minutes, she immediately sat up, and she says, I feel good. She says, I forgot I'm hungry. Get up. I want to get out. I got to get something to eat. And we said, down. No, don't. We'll get you something. We'll make a sandwich. So it just happened. She was healed that quick. So we then got her a sandwich, and the next day we said, well, we have to have this verified. So we brought her to an eye doctor because what the brain did was it gave her what they call papilledema, and it messes up your eyesight, puts pressure on the eyeballs, and it kind of reverses things. So we brought her into the optometrist, and she's looking at the chart. He's pointing to this, and she's saying another letter, and point to an O, and she's saying a B, and point to a C, and says, no, that's a number 3, and he says, well, you can't see. Here, have a candy. Well, she grabbed the lollipop, she threw it against the wall. She says, look at the bottom line. And he looked at the bottom line, and she spelt it right across. She had perfect 20/20 vision. And he looked in her eyes, he says, he called in the other specialist, he says, you got to see this, you got to see this. Look, all the signs of papilledema, which really you couldn't read that stuff if you had that, and yet she was totally healed. And we told the doctor what happened. He couldn't believe it. So they wrote her up in the medical journal as one of the miracles. So I wanted to get that out so people realize that, you know, miracles do happen. So
that's a beautiful story, Tony. Thank you for sharing that.
I was thinking about that all weekend, you know, and I said I got to get that out there for people to have some hope. So with that, I'd like to introduce Father Eric Lenhart as Capuchin Franciscan, ordained in 2015, and he is associate pastor at St. Pius X Church in Middletown, Connecticut. He also teaches courses in homiletics and bioethics at the Holy Apostles Seminary in Cromwell. As a writer, Father Eric writes for the National Catholic Reporter. That's interesting. And has recently written a musical about St. Pius X, and that's a great thing. So with that, Father Eric, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, and thanks for sharing that great story of your daughter. It's very powerful stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's by God's grace, huh? By God's grace. So could you tell us a little bit? How did you get involved becoming a priest?
I think the first moment, sort of the first awakening or inkling I had of priesthood was probably in 5th grade. This is at St. Mary's Grammar School, run by the school Sisters Notre Dame in Hagerstown, Maryland, which of all the schools I've been to, Boston College, I attended West Point for 2 years, went to a great high school. But of all the schools I went to, I think that was the best run school and had the most impact on my life now, looking back, was St. Mary's K through 8 in Hagerstown, Maryland. And, the sisters there did a superb job. And, there's a principle in Thomistic philosophy from St. Thomas Aquinas, and that's all things that are received according to the person's ability to receive them. So what that means is, when I was in 5th grade, I didn't know anything about celibacy or religious orders or, what a priest did even. I didn't know about, I knew of the sacraments, but as far as sacramental ministry, I didn't have the foggiest about what it was. But yet I remember being at Mass and sort of being curious about kind of what the priest did, when he wasn't celebrating Mass with us. And I was part of a prayer group at St. Mary's run by Mrs. Bender, who was the gym teacher / librarian, which tells you a lot about Catholic school budgets right there. But she made a tremendous impact in this little prayer group. We prayed, after school a couple times a week, and there I discovered, really, I think the core of my life still is trying to be kind to people and trying to pray. Those two things, prayer and being kind to people, are sort of the sun that I've tried to revolve around, whether, before I was a Capuchin in college, and then the last, it's 8 years, almost 7 years since I've been a friar, and the whole time just trying to, make myself closer to prayer and kindness and the sacrament of prayer. And I have the great fortune of being a Capuchin, as you mentioned, the gift of my life, and having good brothers and good example to follow.
Were they in Maryland in this school? How did you come by the Capuchins?
I first met the Capuchins when I was a cadet in my 2nd year at West Point. There's a town called Garrison, New York, right across the river from West Point, and Garrison, formerly called Mary Immaculate Friary, was it's a huge monastery. At one point, this is 60 years ago, it housed over 100 Capuchin friars at all levels of formation. High school, college, and then in the seminary. It was pretty much a college and grad school that the friars ran for the friars. So you had all these professors and teachers, along with student friars at this seminary college run by the Capuchins. But when I was a cadet, this is 2001, 2003, it had become a retreat center. And I had been going to Mass for the first time in my life every day as a cadet for, kind of a mixed motivation. You had the option as a plebe, as a freshman cadet, you can go to breakfast formation where the upperclassmen, ask you questions, they'll inspect your shoes, do the hazing thing that happens. But
Yeah.
I learned shortly after being there, you had the option of going to daily mass instead of formation. And I was telling all my roommates about this, all my friends, and we all went to daily mass, and it was the most evangelizing tool I ever could imagine. We missed formation, and then the best part was the chaplain afterwards. We have a little breakfast for those who want to join the chaplain there. Father Edson Wood, who's since gone on to God, he had a little breakfast, and there was no hazing, and you got Pop-Tarts. Which
he was bribing you.
Well, I think that's a basic gospel thing. The Lord gathers people through meals and through the most basic parts of our life. Food and
it's beautiful.
Eucharist, of course, is modeled on a meal, and what God does is uses the most normal things ever to do extraordinary things in our lives. So I look back at that as also a powerful moment, sort of on the steps of my becoming a Capuchin.
Uh-huh. So it's still a big decision, though. So what happened so you got out of West Point. You graduated from West Point?
I did not. After my second year there, I was a sophomore. They call me Yuck, or yearling. And I went on a retreat with the Capuchins across the river. I was sort of in a part of my life when I was deeply considering the direction that I was to go in. And this occurred right after 9/11. 9/11 happened my freshman year, so I had been at the academy, maybe 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden this huge, violent event happened that I knew would affect, my whole life, and especially if I was to continue in the Army, and we were getting all kinds of reports about, mobilizing and what was going to happen down the road. And I got the sense, I was 19 years old, 20 years old, but I got the sense that this was not going to be kind of a short military conflict. This was going to be something long and protracted and yet not a simple solution to this. And so, it got me, that event got me thinking deeply about the course of my life and sort of how I wanted to spend, my life, especially if I was contemplating being part of the military and possibly, going to Afghanistan or Iraq and dying. What was that all about? What was the purpose of this, and what was my purpose, and was I able to reconcile following the Gospels and being part of a violent force?
Right.
So those questions sort of weighed heavy on me. And when you're 19, 20, you're, I think, especially open to philosophy and religion, trying to entertain these big questions about what is life all about, what is my real desire with my life, what are the gifts and talents that I have, how can I use them. And so I was really loving my philosophy courses. I was reading at a real voracious rate that I probably haven't read at that rate since then, just consuming books. And a lot of them were about saints. And several of them were about St. Francis of Assisi, who I believe is the most biographied person second to Jesus. There's tons of biographies on St. Francis, so I had been reading a lot of these. And Francis himself was a soldier, and not a very good one. He was captured the first day in battle with the neighboring town, Perugia.
I didn't know that.
He was a prisoner of war, and they would have killed him, but his dad was very wealthy, so they saw in Francis the potential for a ransom. But he was a prisoner of war for a time, and during his time in prison, he got very sick, had these hallucinations, these dreams, these visions, and he kind of, as I described in my own life, in a way, was kind of thinking, what is my life about? If I'm going to die in this small Perugia prison, what's it all been for? So I saw a lot of what Francis was after, what he was asking, seeking the direction of his life in my own, and kind of finding the discipleship of Jesus as the one thing that gives purpose and unity and reason and inspires selflessness. The deep things, the times when I've most felt alive, have been centered around, mercy and kindness and sacrament. Those are all sort of, I think, God's whispers, drawing me closer to a satisfying vocation. Not easy, but satisfying in a deep way.
But you were listening. We talked about, how mysterious it is, and I always consider myself as the faith of a mustard seed, but I know my Lord and your Lord is watering me, and that's what part of this is, Your story is extreme. Did you have any one individual that kind of guided you?
There were several, and the first friar I ever met was Brother Carlos Hernandez. He was working at West Point part-time as a chaplain while also working at Garrison, the retreat center, which is called CYFM, Capuchin Youth and Family Ministries, where I ended up working there. I had left the academy and ended up going not far at all, just across the river, and was what's called a Cap Corps volunteer. I spent a year of service with the Capuchins doing youth ministry, and it was a lovely year. Prayer, community, working with the friars, and also I was one of 6 people living in community doing this ministry together. And it was such a lovely time that it sparked in me this interest, this possibility of religious life.
Did you ever bump into a guy by the name of John Campbell?
I did. John was, I'm not surprised you know him. I know he comes around St. Pius on occasion. Yeah. John was among the first Cap Corps volunteers, or lay assistants they were called back then. Yeah, John's a lovely guy. I think is he still at Trinity in Hartford as campus minister?
Well, he does. Yeah, he does Central Connecticut State University. Ministering there and Trinity. Does both places.
Okay.
With the Harper Diocese.
Yes. And phenomenal guy, very talented.
Yep, he started with me and my wife and the team that we had at St. Pius X with the youth ministry years ago. Around where the charismatic renewal was getting hyped and everybody being slain in the spirit. That whole era was pretty dynamic. So that's where John started. Yeah. And
John and I know him from a week we spent together in Harlan County, Kentucky, on a trip we took with the teenagers back in 2004.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. He did a lot of that.
I think he's still doing it.
Well, I don't know if he went this last trip. He was getting involved with some other stuff, I know. But I'm not sure he did. No, he's been doing it for years. I know that. But, you get called out of those ministries, you keep moving. God keeps moving you, to where he wants you. That's the mystery of that whole thing, Yeah, that's interesting. You're ordained. How'd you find the seminary? Where did you go for school?
So, the Capuchin program, becoming a Capuchin is in some ways different than becoming a priest of a diocese. Because our primary thing is some of us are priests, some of us are not, some of us are social workers, teachers, we have lawyers in the order, professors, we have, chaplains, a great variety of ministries, but the primary thing is we're all brothers. We're all friars. The word friar is kind of derived from the French word frère, for brother. So whether you're a priest or a lawyer or social worker, whatever your ministry is, it's being a friar that really connects us. So the first year, you spend in postulancy, You're a Capuchin postulant, and that's in Brooklyn. East New York is a neighborhood of Brooklyn. So I was there for a year, and the purpose of that year is just to learn about the Capuchins, our ministry, the history of the friars, also finishing a person's, catechesis or, ongoing education in the faith, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we view this as a bit of an experiment. Also, the word used in our constitutions, which is kind of our documents that guide us and help us interpret the rule of St. Francis and the Gospels, is this phrase, daring adventure of love. And I think that's not just applicable to being a Capuchin, but also applicable to every vocational journey with God. People who marry do so by committing themselves to a nebulous future. You don't know, if your spouse is going to get sick, if you're going to have a lot of wealth. The vows in themselves when a person marries for sickness or health, rich or poor, have this sort of unknown future quality to them. And being a Capuchin is no different. We commit ourselves to, we have certainly an idea of what the Lord's calling us to, but there's tons of things that are question marks, and that's where the idea of having faith, of just taking a small step, having that mustard seed, as you mentioned, the perfect image, just having faith to take one more step, and we don't plan 20 years in advance. We kind of, try and plan a few years out of what the next step might be for us as a province of friars in New York, in New England, trying to interpret what is the mission for the church and the Capuchins in 2017 and in 2018. So, as a postulant, you don't know where you're going to end up in the future or what ministry you're going to have. You're simply asking the question, what is a Capuchin Franciscan? Who am I? And are these two things, this reality of being a Capuchin and my personal, baptismal reality, my gifts and talents, my personality, are these things compatible? And is it challenging me enough? Is it integrating my personality? And is it making me become fully alive? Because that's certainly the project, for any person, that God calls us to become fully alive in who we are. That's the process. Exactly.
And it's being a third order Carmelite along with my wife. And by the way, when you made reference to, years ago, my wife was my first, second, and third grade sweetheart. She's my little girlfriend. And while I stayed back in third grade, she not only went forward, but she moved out of town. And I remember standing under a maple tree with holding my mother's hand and crying, "Mommy, Mommy, where did she go?" We finally got hooked up back in high school, and we've been together. We've been together since day one when God actually gave it to me. Me to her. I'm not sure which. My current CEO.
I think, that's a great way to put it. Did God give her to me or me to her? I think it's a situation of a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. There's that, marriage is all about mutuality and equality, and that partnership where there's a kind of a two-way gift there.
Yeah, and then we're blessed to both be Carmelites, because it's kind of rare in us to be married, to have married couples in the Carmelites. They do exist, but it's not predominant. At least I haven't come across that. But and it's a beautiful thing, because we bring the sacrament of marriage, which is a positive sacramental. So the blessings are attached to that too. For both the church, because you raise family, and you just pray that that all turns out well. Like Saint Monica for 30 years, the kid, and Saint Augustine finally becomes a saint after 30 years. That sort of thing. So it's quite the challenge, And our basis on it is, although I wish it would be wine and roses, but it's not. Like any marriage or anything in life, for that matter, You just got to learn one word. I say forgiveness. Forgiveness. If you can master that, then life goes on quite mellow.
Well, I think
so.
The
That's very interesting.
Emphasized mercy. The Pope has emphasized mercy as a way of life for Christians, and I think it's the only way of life. It's the only way to navigate all of our personal and communal difficulties is with a merciful heart. So I think marriage is a great school for that.
Right.
Marriage gives you endless chances to forgive.
Yeah. And you're part of a decade. Now, you don't recall, because I think this happened after you when they pulled God out of churches back in 1963. So your recollection of any public school or any of that didn't involve any of that, huh? You didn't have prison school.
I went to a public high school, and...
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
This is some rusty gears moving here. I think we had a Pledge of Allegiance, and then a moment of silence, I think, was how they...
Yeah, okay, right.
How they did that, the morning exercises.
Yeah.
I don't know what people did during that time. I'm not sure what I did during that time, but it was like maybe 15 seconds of silence.
That's a good analogy. Sometimes we don't know what we're doing. It's just blind faith, just keep moving one step ahead of the other. So, now you're involved with the youth. Where are they today, do you think, spirituality?
If you can figure that question out, let me know. I like working with youth. I did a year, as I mentioned, at CYFM. The energy and the enthusiasm for youth is tremendous. And really, whenever I baptize a baby, I remind the couple and say, never be embarrassed when you hear your child cry during church, during Mass. Even if someone, looks at you kind of funny, don't be embarrassed, because that's, first of all, the first sound that Jesus made was crying. It's the first sound we all made. It's the sound of new life. And the church needs to hear that sound of new life, and that's what the young, from their earliest moments of infancy and being a toddler on, offer. In the teenage years is this enthusiasm, energy, and for me, it's one of the greatest moments when, as a teacher or a priest, you can see a little spark in a teenager's mind where some teaching of the church that they either didn't fully consider or learn, all of a sudden has some kind of application in their life. Talking about vocation, the future, prayer, whatever the teaching is. You can almost see them kind of spark. Now, oftentimes you're kind of working against the grain of a lot of what's taught in our culture is religion, something.
Yeah.
It has some terrible ideas, some untrue ideas, and one of the things like religion is boring, religion is oppressive. But all of a sudden, you make a connection with a young person, and you're talking either in a homily or on a retreat or in a class, and all of a sudden they come to a new understanding of themselves and the Lord and God's plan for them. What's better than that? And that's really all we do as Christians, is attempt to pass on what we've been given. I was given that by the school sisters in Notre Dame when I was in grade school at St. Mary's, and now it's tremendous pleasure and joy and a vocation for me to do the same thing for young people.
It's a beautiful ministry. It does get difficult because people don't realize how much you really deal with. You're dealing with life, and you're dealing with a lot of deaths too. There's a lot of funerals that most people don't. They just don't deal with that number. In any given year. It may be one, you lose a spouse, or you lose a cousin or uncles or something like that once in a while, but Not like a priest, you know. And that's, yeah, I can see where that could be difficult, you know. But at the same token, speaking reality, I mean, that's the way life is, you know.
Yeah.
And at my age, I tell my buddies, I said, there's only one word I worry about, and that's called eternity. You know?
When you scratch deep enough, any person is worried about that, and we do a lot of things sometimes that are harmful to us to not have to think about reality or consequences or eternity. But I've found, you know, I've been a priest less than 2 years. I've found funerals to be among the deeper things that I do. It's a moment of, it depends, you know, it all depends whether, you know, the man is in their 90s or, you know, in their 20s. There's always a loss there. And it's, for me, a great source of depth to offer something of the truth of how the Lord describes in the Gospels the kingdom of heaven, the one kingdom. It unites us in time and space. And for myself, it puts me in a place, too, thinking about all the people that have been saints to me. You know, we all have our list of personal saints who have guided us step by step along this journey that we're not alone in. We stretch back through 2 centuries, you know, to the apostles, the first disciples of Jesus. That we're part of this. We're part of this thing.
Yeah, it's a struggle, and it's got to be. The one thing that kind of drives me a little wacky is, you know, some people, they just say, "Oh, I'm not like that saint. I'm not like her or him," and "Oh, I don't have that kind of life." But you know, that's not what it's about, really. Being a saint is just trying to do the little things, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, for instance. You see a piece of paper on the ground. You pick it up and put it, dispose of it right. You know, if you see pews down at church, you lift them up. You pick up put away the books, put away whatever has to be put away. Just do those little things. That's all God's really asking us to do. We don't. The big things will come later. You know, and if it doesn't, that's okay too, because, you know, we're called on to do the little things. If everybody did little things, we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. So, and to be called into your ministry, being a priest, is beautiful. It's just that it's a beautiful ministry. And there's a lot of, you know, it's like, there's a lot of loneliness, I know, that's associated with that too, you know. But God is there. God's always there. So, I just look up.
I've met people, loneliness is a central human experience, you know, whether you're rich or poor, married or single, or, you know, a priest or a sister. I've met a lot of priests who are lonely. I also know a lot of married couples who are lonely, people who are married. You know, being married doesn't necessarily eliminate that part, you know. There's a deep part of us that wants to be known in a deep way. And that central feeling of loneliness in our existence can be a powerful impetus, something to spark us into prayer. Because the reality is, no relationship, you know, can really satisfy us outside of the Lord. You know,
that's exactly right.
We have great friends and great spouses, and, you know, I have great brothers, and I'm grateful they're blessings in my life. But you know, when you sit down and you have a moment of just whatever it is, fear, grief, you know, isolation, you know, they're only the Lord can penetrate that kind of the problem, you know, of loneliness.
Yeah, and it's really resolved through prayer. It really is resolved through prayer. I mean, I've witnessed a bishop being invisible in front of over 400 people. I've witnessed healings. I was part of a healing ministry where the Lord used me as an empty vessel, my wife and I, and having people be slain. We've seen feet grow. We've seen it's just miraculous miracles. You know, Jesus is alive and doing well. He uses, like Father Ralph Diorio up in Worcester, Mass, Father DeGrandis. even Father Bill McCarthy, I think you know him down at Moodus, right? My father's house. I've witnessed a lot of healings through him, physical, mental, all kinds of ways. So those gifts are there just for the asking. And I believe a lot of the loneliness where we feel lonely is because we really want to be back home. And home doesn't mean here. Home means to be with our Lord who created us.
Yeah.
And gave us what's right on. Yeah.
My life is very good. It's, I love creation, of course. But, there is something that beyond the horizon, and this I don't think is just a Christian claim or a Catholic claim. I think, any person, if they're really thinking deeply, there's something that they seek that can't be filled. And this is the idea of, the Incarnation from the view of St. Francis of Assisi, that God enters into human loneliness. In the birth of Jesus, you have immigrants, Mary and Joseph, who are rejected, trying to find a place to have the baby, So the Lord enters into this darkness, this difficulty, he's born in a barn, and barns smell bad because animals smell bad, and yet the Lord is born into this stinky part of our existence to give us healing and peace and light. And even towards the end of his life, Gethsemane, the Garden of Olives, is experiencing rejection from his close friends. So Jesus was not afraid of this loneliness. He felt it, and when we feel it, it gives us a possibility for connection with the Lord.
Yeah. And that's where we have to turn. That's the only answer that I can resolve. But you mentioned something about having friends. On the journey, doesn't he give you a lot of good, faithful friends? And they're not the old friends that used to get you in trouble. It's new friends. It's such a blessing,
I'm convinced it really is impossible to do anything great by yourself. You mentioned earlier I'm writing this musical.
Right.
And I had the idea but I immediately had lots of people that were willing to help me, and especially Brian Niedermeyer, our organist, Koska, a ton of parishioners helped out, and to me it was just proving the whole premise of church. Anything worth doing, we really got to do together. We're not lone wolves, in ministry. The whole point of creation, human beings are made for relationships. And so through our vocation, God breaks us out of isolation and darkness to bring us into new relationships, to give us peace.
Now, it's mentioned. You mentioned also that you write for the National Catholic Reporter.
I've been doing some blogging for them past I guess a year and a half now. They have an online website. I had written a article a couple of years ago for the print. Yeah, I like writing. Writing engages my brain on a different level. Homilies are one thing that I really enjoy, of course, and enjoy teaching about. But writing is sort of taking a thought and really wringing it out from all possible angles. Writing for me has a little more rigor to it than offering a 6-minute, 7-minute homily. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that.
That's good. What is it? Various subjects? Is that?
I've actually been doing mostly movie reviews the past couple months with a couple variations. If I got something hot on my mind, I'll kick it around. But I've been doing movie reviews. I'll see a movie and I'll analyze it from different Catholic themes, different human themes, philosophy, and offer my analysis. So that's been fun because I like watching movies. So it kind of gives me a little more purpose to take it beyond just entertainment, but try and examine it, from a point of view looking for what's teachable, in this film?
Right.
What's something that, a catechist, someone teaching, CCD or a class, what's something they might use as an example for a way to offer something, deeper in this film? So I enjoyed that.
Did you see The Shack? Have you seen that one?
Mention to me? I think someone mentioned to me last week at Mass. I would like to see it. It's on my list.
It's good. We went and saw it. It's very interesting. They deal with a lot of dynamics about our faith and about who we are and how we analyze things. And I think it brings a lot of negative selves into the movie, along with the positive things we want to be. It's probably the best description I can give. And it's beautifully put together, I thought.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching it. Don't spoil it for me.
No. I'm not going to tell you anything. Oh, no. I didn't give you hardly anything. No. I wouldn't do that. You have to go see it.
I think it just came out like last week, right? It's new film.
Yeah. It's playing in Middletown. I know that.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's great. Now, so how are you making out with the musical? How's that going?
It's been a gift. It's been kind of consuming my mind. It's a lot of things, and thank God we got over 40 people involved. All the set, the crew, the cast, the production team. Even the fundraising. We had 3 ladies, Gail, Diane, and Lynn, make a quilt that we raffled off that kind of got us some of the fundraising we needed for the show. And this is sort of my first time being a director of musical, so thank God I have tons of help at the parish, because it's not really I don't view it as like my project. I view it as something that we are doing together. It's our project at St. Pius, and I'm looking forward to May 5th, 6th, and 7th, doing those 3 shows, and culminating a lot of work and effort on behalf of the parish here. It's just fun,
Is it an hour and a half show?
We got, all told, about 2 hours of entertainment with about a 15-minute intermission. So maybe hour 40 of show.
Yeah. That's good.
It's a full-length show.
Yeah, nobody's done it on St. Pius X that I know of.
Would you believe papal musicals are not the hottest thing right now? But I think once people see it, but ironically, John Paul II actually was a playwright.
Yeah.
John Paul II was part of the underground Polish theater scene when he was a young man in his 20s.
Yeah, that's right. So, you triggered a little conscience up here. I remember that.
And the church has always been about using art to transmit anything true. That's what stained glass is all about, trying to tell a story, even when the Middle Ages was a very low literacy rate, so they used art, stained glass, paintings, theater. All these things were mechanisms to pass on things that are true and worthy of being received.
Yeah. Speaking about art, I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the altar, if you look at the pedestal facing the altar from the pews, right, the left-hand pedestal has a divine image ingrained in the grain. And if you look at the picture that's hanging on the wall to the left and look at that pedestal, you'll see that the grain in the wood represents the divine image, divine mercy image.
I had not yet observed that, Tony. Thanks for pointing that out. From my angle, I don't have the same angle you have.
Right.
Next time I'm in tomorrow, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I just think that's pretty miraculous, because God, we had talked about how God uses us in very mysterious ways, and that's one of the things, one of the ways. Years ago, you used to see the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit on the crucifix itself. But since they renovated it and painted it with the lighting, they kind of distorted it so you don't really see that. But that was very much a focal point too. Not that we have to. The image is the image to remind us of who Jesus was. But I just found that curious to have it embedded in the grain, divine mercy. And I personally think Christ that's in is going to be used in a very powerful way in the near future. I just had this thing. I witnessed myself just Sunday in a very different way of seeing all the people in heaven with us, So I have this image of, like I tell my buddies, one thing we have our discussions. We just like the apostles, and some disagreements and agreements, but that's good. You need that, You've got to kick things around to try to get things right. But I said, look, you guys, you got to remember, we're in the ark. If you don't think we are, take a look at what's happening on the outside. Pretty obvious what's going on out there. But I says, we're in the ark. It's just a question of trying to, fine-tune it so we can get the speed up. That's a lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's a powerful image.
Isn't that true? So that's where we are. Without struggle, not going forth. So I don't know if we had any call-ins or anything.
No, I didn't really publicize the number. I was going to ask you, Father Eric. You mentioned that when you were in K through 8 there at St. Mary's, you said that you actually at that time heard about Thomas Aquinas and people like that.
No, that was sort of the my several decades later way of describing what happened. I didn't know what a priest really did as far as visiting, sick people, weddings, confessions. Those weren't things I was aware of, but I was somehow curious about priesthood and the life that a priest lived. And I'm a Capuchin now, but I didn't know what a Capuchin was at that point in time. So I used that little Thomistic principle about receiving things. Like a child can receive a certain amount of knowledge and information, and they know who they are enough to kind of take a few steps. And that's what I was describing is even not knowing much about priesthood, something about it still I found curious, and inspiring.
The reason I ask is because we have a program that started last week on the station. It's at 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, in other words, our time, 2 o'clock, and it's called the Lost Voice Program, and it's done by a couple of young men in St. Paul, Minneapolis that, I don't know if they graduated from Holy Apostles, but they were in the distance learning program. And the program, the Lost Voice Program, engages contemporary society with classical philosophy and its application to the faith, the family, and the world through conversation, interviews, and general camaraderie. That's how they describe the program. But one of their things is to bring classical philosophy and make it available to, like you say, you work with the youth, and make it available to the younger people. And they want it. When they hear about it. And like I say, some of these things have been lost. Like I talked to a man that went to Regis College in Denver. I think he was there 3 years. He never heard the name Thomas Aquinas. In the 3 years he was there. So there are people that are trying to change that whole thing. And this two young men over in St. Paul, Minnesota, are actually bringing it into, confirmation, to catechism, and so that the young people at least have some idea of what this is all about,
I'm happy to hear that, Bob, because it's a shame how just because, so first, Aristotle, Aquinas, St. Augustine, Plato, the ancients were a lot more sophisticated than we realized.
Really?
And somehow along the way, being old became reason to disqualify thoughts, and there's a reason that, Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, the great Christian philosophers, there's a reason that people repeated what they wrote and said. There was something about it that was true and timeless, even though, they didn't know, obviously, about cells or biology or electrons.
Right.
But wisdom is about, and there are people who know a lot about electrons and quarks and, subatomic particles that lack wisdom. Wisdom is the deeper reality of, connecting one's life through relationships, and somehow along the way, wisdom and knowledge got confused, and this certainly have a connection. But I think we do our youth a great disservice by not connecting them to the deep questions of, what's my life all about? It's not just
I wanted to mention that program because it's on at 2:00 in the afternoon. I don't know if you can get to it, but it's and the address. It's WCAT Radio, WCATradio.com, and then you go up in the left-hand corner, find the programs, and it's listed there.
And what's the name again?
The name of the program is the Lost Voice Program.
The Lost Voice. Okay, that sounds like a good one.
Okay. But the other thing I want to mention, too, is you, early on in the discussion, you talked about when you first went to the Capuchins there across the river, and you had those meals with them, and how God uses just natural things like that, to bring people together. And there was a guitar player that used to play in all the nightclubs in this area, and his wife was in a prayer group, and she wanted him to start playing at the prayer group. And he says, "No, I don't want any of that stuff." He says, "Those people are hypocrites or whatever, I don't want to get involved with them." Well, then there was a social where everybody came to this social. It wasn't the prayer meeting. And he came to the social, and when he found out that these were real people, in this prayer group, he took on the job and became their guitar player.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Well,
everything is about relationships.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. And to invite people, critical. You have to invite them.
Right.
But
Tony,
the
you're
other
good
thing
for that.
Well, I try to be open. Like I say, I'm an empty vessel, and the faithful must see that's being watered. And
but you're the messenger too, though.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there is a lot to it, but a lot of times, Bob, people say to me, especially with the Carmelites, they say, "Well, where did you hear that? We've never heard that before." And I'd have to reply, "I just heard it myself for the first time." It's really being open to the Holy Spirit and having Him speak through you, And you see that even if you look for it, and you can see it in church. I mean, you can see it through a kid's eyes. You can see it through an adult. There's something that happens in church that could be comical, but at the same token, you say, Lord, I get it. I get it. Because there's the fun side of Jesus, too. We forget that.
The good thing about you, Tony, the good thing about you have that group, that meets every Saturday morning at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful witness where men get together and talk about their faith.
Yeah.
In other words, they're not like the old days. They used to say, "Oh, I don't wear my faith on my what we used to be on my."
Yeah, you don't display it in public, but we're far beyond that. We're in a point of evangelization. I mean, sometimes we get a little loud too. We apologize.
Well, that's good, though, because then.
Tables in response say, no, we want to hear that. So there's a hunger out there. Just like our Lord says, there's a hunger for the truth. What's the truth? So that's what we do. We speak the truth.
I was in a restaurant with a person, and we were talking about our faith, and I guess we got kind of loud, and there was a lady with her little son across the aisle, and when she left the restaurant, she stopped by our booth and said, it's really good to hear people talk about their faith. Thank you.
Yeah.
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 We were just talking amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I don't wear my faith on my my coat sleeve, something like that.
right.
That's what they used to say, My faith is private.
Uh-huh.
Not true.
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, no, it's because it's about relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
The Lord is a Trinity, a relationship of three, and we, being made in God's image, are made for relationships. So nothing really human. In fact, it's really anti-human to isolate and to fragment and to disintegrate parts of our lives. I think the Lord is the source of unity that gives unity to the whole, integrates even the painful experiences of our lives, are all grist for the mill.
Yeah, very good.
Something new in the new power.
By the way, what's the name of your musical?
It's called Tenth, a Pious Musical, but it's spelled like X, a Pious Musical, because it's Roman numeral.
Ah.
Okay.
It's about our patron here at St. Pius X Parish in Middletown, who had quite a life. He was the last pope not to have a doctorate. He was one of 10 children born in what's now in northern Italy at the time in the 1800s, the Kingdom of Lombardy. Born dirt poor, and he wasn't supposed to become pope. But at the conclave of 1903, there was a veto. We don't know exactly what happened, but whoever had been elected, who was Cardinal Mariano Rampallo, who was the Secretary of State under Leo XIII, he hadn't been elected pope, but he had gotten a majority of votes in that first ballot. And Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria-Hungary vetoed Rampallo, and as it happened, the conclave ended up voting for Giuseppe Sarto, who became Pope Pius X. Yep.
Oh,
wow.
So,
When I learned that, I was like, this is a perfect drama for a musical, or a play, because that's what drama and prayer, and to come from being one of 10 children, walking to school. He actually walked to school over 4 miles. He couldn't afford seminary, but luckily the town blacksmith knew his son was a cardinal, so the cardinal sponsored Sarto at his school. So the whole man's life was one that was blessed and fascinating.
just like your life's going to be.
We're out of time, so
that went by quickly.
We'll be back next week, same time, same station, with Tony Szalkiewicz, the messenger. And Father, maybe in closing, if you can give us your blessing today, huh?
Yes.
Certainly. Blessed are you, Lord God of all creation. You give us hearts and minds for your service, and you give us friends and relationships to give us energy and to inspire us. Thank you for all you've given us, and continue to help us to walk your path to deeper relationships, mercy, prayer, and love in this season of Lent. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, Tony, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Father.
Most welcome, Tony. Thank you, Bob.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.